Good evening, Southview. How's everyone doing? It is so good to be with everyone this evening. I'm so excited to have my friends Carl and Kate Thomas here with us and really addressing something that's very pervasive in our culture and time. But I think that Southview is doing an incredible job in addressing this thing and having a whole weekend that's dedicated to focusing on it. And thanks to all of you parents, soon-to-be parents, grandparents, people joining us online. Thank you all. I know we're starting a little bit late, but I wanted to make sure that enough of the people that signed up was here before we got going, because tonight is going to be an interview style, and I didn't want people coming halfway through the interview and miss the good stuff that Carl and Kate and I are going to talk about. And so I gave you guys some time, so we're starting a little bit behind, but that's okay. What's important is that we have this time to have these discussions and be able to engage in a topic that we all need to learn and grow in. And I'm very excited to be here. My name is Fernando. I'm the small groups pastor here at Southview. And I'm honored to be here and facilitate this discussion on this topic of shameless parenting, which you might be like, what's that all about? We'll unpack that in a minute here. But before I go any further, I wanted us to pray and wanted to remind you of a couple things. There's dessert over there and coffee and water, so make sure you can grab that throughout the time. And so make sure you do that now if you haven't done so as yet. And then there's a few resources available that we'll be talking about at the end. But on the table, there's Carl book is available there through that link, or you can actually buy a hard copy after the service here, after our time here. And then also there's a Q&A that will be at the end. So in case there's stuff that we didn't capture for you, or we had a question, we'll be able to dive into that. We'll leave some time for that to happen. But I don't want to take up a lot of time just blabbling on up here. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to start with some stats that you need to be aware of. And some of the stats that I'm about to read after I pray they're going to be quite jarring, but it's not to shame and it's not to scare us. It's to, again, remind us and help us to have awareness about what's going on in the world of parenting and internet and all those things. But before that, let me pray. Father, I thank you so much for the gift of tonight, and thank you so much for the gift of your Holy Spirit that is here, and we recognize that, and we ask that you would bring illumination and revelation to our hearts, that I know you might challenge us with some of the conversations today, and I ask that you would help, that this would be a time of equipping for each of us. And I pray for Carl and Katie as they share, for your hand to be upon them as well, as they share their story, as they share their heart with Southview, as they share their experience as being parents and their experience in this realm. And so we just thank you for the gift of this time, God, and I ask that you would be with us and that you would help us to grow in knowledge and wisdom in who you are and how you want us to live in the world when it comes to sex, when it comes to the internet, when it comes to us being parents. That you would help us to parent out of grace, out of understanding, out of willingness to learn and grow. So we just thank you for this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I'm going to get into some of these stats here with you. And again, my motto for this weekend is kind of like, we're going to have to learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because that's what these topics are. But I think we need to get better at talking about this with our kids, especially as parents. So we'll be able to experience some of that. So here's some stats, some facts and realities that we face in our time. Stats for parents regarding kids, youth, teens around the topic of internet and pornography. 14% of 7 to 17-year-olds who would freely give out their email address. So they just give it out to anybody. 7 to 17-year-olds. One article states this: more than 90% of teens in the U.S. have their own cell phones. Technology enables kids to connect with one another in different ways, providing both new connections and distractions. One major consequence of this shift in communication is a surge in sexting. According to recent research, nearly 15% of youth have sent sexual explicit material. More than 25% has received it. Sexting is connected with trauma and violence. Youth who engage in sexting are 3 times more likely to experience emotional victimization and are also more likely to experience dating relationship violence. And now we get into some Canadian stats. Stats Canada states that between 2014 and 2020, police reported 10,739 incidents of online sexual offenses against children, where the victim had been identified by police, and 29,028 incidents of online child pornography where the victim had not been identified. 7 in 10, so 37% of victims identified in online sexual offenses against children were girls aged 12 to 17, and 13% were girls under age 12. Boys aged 12 to 17 accounted for 11% of victims, and remaining 3% were boys under the age of 12. 47% of Christian households feel that pornography is a major problem in their homes. According to our Barna research, only 1 in 10 teens and 1 in 20 young adults think that viewing pornography is a bad thing. 90% of boys were exposed to porn before the age of 18. 33% of teen girls are viewing online pornography for half an hour or more at a time. And so those stats that I just read, probably the last 5 or 6, those were not Canadian stats. It was one of the stats about sexting that was. Now, these are some stats from Common Sense Media survey. And this is one statement from this survey that Common Sense Media did. And for better or worse, online pornography is shaping the views about sex and sexual relationships, as nearly as half, 45% of teen respondents said that they felt online pornography gives helpful information about sex. Unintentional exposure to pornography could be a common experience for teens, as 63% of those who said they have only seen pornography accidentally reported that they had been exposed to pornography in the past week. The majority of teens who reported in this survey that they had seen pornography said they feel okay about the amount of pornography they watch. 67% still have 50% report feeling guilty or ashamed after watching pornography. And this is a statement from a good friend of mine. He's here in the room tonight. He said this when we were talking about this. Parenting can be a tough and at times scary. The bottom line is most parenting struggle with navigating these conversations. So my prayer, this is my part, and I trust that Carl and Katie's can help us with that, with a little of their New Jersey passion and directness. So I want to introduce you to Carl and Katie Thomas, and I'll read a little bit of their bio, guys. You can come up as I do this. Carl and Katie Thomas are the founders of Live Free Ministries and have been married over the 20 years with 2 teenagers of their own. They understand the unique challenges that both men and women encounter in their struggle against pornography addiction, the complexities of parenting, and the weight of shame. In 2019, Carl launched Live Free Ministries and created, you guys can have a seat. They have two teenagers of their own. They understand the unique challenges that both men and women encounter with their struggle against pornography addiction, the complexities of parenting, and the weight of shame. In 2019, Carl launched Live Free Ministries and created the Live Free Community app to provide a safe and supportive community for men who hunger for real freedom from sex addiction. 1 year later, he and Katie introduced Live Free Wives, a support community aimed at providing assistance to spouses affected by sexual betrayal. And in 2011, Carl assumed the leadership of xxchurch.com, furthering their commitment to their crucial cause. Katie is a dedicated educator, and Carl is an ordained pastor, author of the book When Shame Gets Real, certified Neuro Health Coach, and is presently pursuing a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Their passion for guiding individuals towards freedom, inner peace. They have a passion for guiding people towards freedom and inner peace, and a sense of purpose rivaled only by their charming New Jersey directness. You'll hear some of that tonight. Deep-rooted love for family and unwavering devotion to Philadelphia sports team. And I spent some time with these guys last June, and yes, they are hardcore. So, without further ado, Carl and Katie. How you guys doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Rested.
Yeah.
Took a day, but
Awesome. And you guys had a good time on Thursday?
yeah. And the people we hung out with they were pretty cool.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Carl and Katie, we're going to just jump right in because I know we started a little bit behind, so I just want to jump right in and ask a few questions. And so, what do you guys mean by the term shameless parenting? Furthermore, how does shame intersect with technology, sex, porn, and purity with those within and outside the church? I know that's loaded, so you can start with the first part. What do you mean by shameless parenting?
Shameless parenting. So I think that covers a lot of area, right? So it's the willingness to engage in conversations that are sensitive, mostly because we've made them sensitive socially, right? Like we've put boundaries around certain topics. We've made them taboo when honestly they probably don't need to be taboo. They're just legitimate aspects of life. So it's talking about this stuff, trying to remove the embarrassment, trying to remove the awkwardness, acknowledging the reality of the world we live in, acknowledging the realities revolving around sex, around how our bodies and brains work, and just being willing to engage in those conversations with our kids. Mm-hmm. And then also, I would say the part two to that is also trying to help them answer questions that they have without allowing them to put shame on other people, right? So, Dad, I saw this happen at school, whatever it was, it made me feel gross, or I didn't like that, or I think that kid's a scumball, right? And, okay, hey, that wasn't a good choice, but understand they're a person. They might have something going on. You don't want to judge them like that, mm-hmm. but certainly don't necessarily want to repeat that behavior. And then maybe trying to help them process why maybe their friend sent their other friend a sex pic, right? Sexted or something like that. So that's how I would define it.
Katie, you have anything to add to that, or you covered it?
I would just say that, we're all in this life trying to do the best job that we can do for our kids, and, our philosophy is to not screw them up too badly along the way, because honestly, like, our parents did the best that they could do with the knowledge that they had. A lot of it is trial and error, but we're in such a broken world that trying to raise them to be Christ-like, not be embarrassed of conversations that the church shies away from, and just being open with us. And I feel like that's basically really what we've tried to do, is have an open communication with our kids so that they don't feel uncomfortable asking questions that are uncomfortable to have with your parents. I mean, my parents didn't really talk to me about sex. So I think that is a big thing that we've tried to instill in our children, is just open communication. Like, nothing is off limits. You can talk to us. And we started that early on so that they know that it's a safe place to come.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. From your guys' perspective, what are the most important topics parents, both mothers and fathers, should be discussing with their children regarding sex and pornography specifically?
Yeah, so, definitely regarding sex and pornography, right? Because as parents, we should be talking to our kids about a whole lot of stuff. But when it comes to that, obviously sex, right? What is sex? What is the purpose of sex? God's purpose for sex. Why is it a good thing? It is a good thing, so all of that. The nature of the biblical nature of sex, what it really is, not what we sometimes make it out to be. Mm-hmm. So I would say sex, porn, because that is a reality. Not to scare people, your kid's probably going to see porn, right? Unless you live in the mountains with no electronic access whatsoever. Masturbation, it's not going to say it's necessarily a healthy thing, but it's a relatively natural thing. If you read developmental books, kids are going to explore, right? They're going to have questions about their bodies. They're going to notice that certain things feel good when they touch them, right? So you have to have a conversation about masturbation, because if you don't, you're just asking for problems. And online, unfortunately today, online security, I guess you'd say. Okay. Making your kids aware of the dangers that are out there, predators, not letting all your information out on social media, right? Not sending things that they shouldn't send. making them aware of the fact that everything on the internet it's there forever. There's no taking back.
Right.
So those sorts of things for me, at least.
Yeah, I'm also come from like a teacher perspective. I teach second grade, which I think you call grade 2 here.
Yeah.
So I just see that, I think it's the unawareness of parents that kids are very quick to give out their information. In America, at least, a game that my students play a lot is Roblox, and they're very quick to like give out their name, and they're very quick to play online. And oftentimes I'll ask the kids, like, do you even know who you're playing with? And they're like, oh no, Mrs. Thomas. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, I think parents aren't aware of just how dangerous some of these things can really be. Because you're never gonna let your kid go unsupervised at a park and leave them be. But online, we just let our kids go for the most part. And I think COVID changed a lot of that too. You know, the accessibility to the internet just became part of our lives because of online learning. So unfortunately, this is a fallout from that as well, I think.
One other thing. So as your kids get older, dating too. Dating, yeah, that's a big one. Especially, I'd say, because we have a daughter and a son, so those conversations are going to look very different. You know, what I say to Hunter regarding dating is much more focused around respecting the girl, respecting yourself, having goals, and we'll probably get into all that in terms of where you want your relationship to be in the future with whoever you eventually end up with, and what you do now, how that could impact it, and how you got to think through that stuff. But with a girl, it's more about, hey, honoring yourself, knowing your worth, not letting another person try to dictate what you're worth. And you know, so just trying to reinforce that sort of stuff, and also avoiding victim blaming, things like that, right? Okay. Hey, you're responsible for your conduct. You're not responsible for his conduct. He's responsible for his conduct, and also covering safety and boundaries. And that if a boy violates your boundaries, he's an unsafe person. You know, you need to end that. So I think dating's a huge one as they get older. I'm not going to have that conversation with my 8-year-old, but my 14, 15-year-old, absolutely. And those conversations are ongoing, and we've had multiple conversations with both my son and our daughter. Well, our
and
son.
honestly, so our daughter's 19 and she just finished her first year of college. So that was a conversation we had. Now she goes to a Christian university, and that doesn't mean that everyone there is safe. So we had to have a conversation with her about, if you start dating someone and things aren't okay, you call your dad. And it doesn't matter that he's 5.5 hours away. That boy's gonna know that he's in trouble.
Well, that leads right into this next point about who do you believe should have the question about sex? Should it be the mom to the moms, daughter to daughter, mom to daughter, or father to son? Yeah, who should be having that conversation?
So obviously in our family, we have a boy and a girl, so I was able to talk to Mia about sex, and we started, the first time I talked to her was when she was 8, because I think research said that, I feel like you read something, right? That said that it's important to start talking to your children when they're young enough that they're not gonna feel uncomfortable with this conversation. So I took her out and we did ceramics, and at the table we just talked about the basics. Nothing too crazy or in depth, but just to start the conversation going. Obviously in all families, sometimes mom has to do both roles of mom and dad. Sometimes dad has to do both roles. So it's gonna look different in each family, but for us, I handled her and you handled Hunter. And it looked different for each child too. Carl's conversation with Hunter was very different than my conversation with Mia. But I do feel like starting so young made a difference in the fact that our kids are super open with us. Sometimes too open, but they know nothing is off limits with us. And so I'm sure my parents shake their heads sometimes when they hear conversations that we have, because my parents are very conservative Christians, and we raise our children so that they know that they can talk to us.
Well, I wanted to, this is not on my notes, but I just thought about it as you were speaking. There's probably people here that the kids are past that age. Have they blown it? Has it all gone? Or what would you say to that? They haven't had that conversation. The kid is now 15, 13.
And it's super uncomfortable too. I was sick in my stomach when I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm gonna talk to my 8-year-old about this. Because no, it's awkward at first. But I don't think any time, like if you didn't talk yet, no time is too late to start that conversation. It's just important to have a healthy line of communication between you and your child.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, regarding your question, I would echo that. Like, just because, I don't want to say you've blown it, but just because you missed that opportunity doesn't mean you just then cross your fingers and hope for the best. But I would say when you go have that opportunity, at least from my perspective, a big thing would be to own it. Just acknowledge it. Hey, I should have had this conversation sooner. I realize that. That's on me. And I realize that because of that, you probably feel a little uncomfortable about this. But I want to start fresh and, just be honest and try to, and hey, they might roll with it, they might not, but you got to put it out there for sure. And yeah, dad, ideally, dad with son, at least in the beginning, daughter, mother with daughter. But in our case, that has shifted over the years. They will both talk to both of us. Now, admittedly, Hunter will talk to me about guy stuff more than her. But Mia has talked to me about a lot of stuff that she probably wanted to talk to me when she was 13, but now she's 19. She'll come to me and she'll say, hey, Dad, I'm glad that I can talk about this with you, because she has friends. She goes to a Christian school, and most of her friends do not have that. Like, she'll say that, hey, I'm not going to say their name, but, Susie. She doesn't have a friend named Susie, but, Susie's great, but Susie, she cannot talk about this stuff with her parents. That's like kind of an off-limits thing. So, so it's been good. We've seen the results of that.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple times where it's gone dicey. Like when I had my first talk with Hunter, I had it at a restaurant after we saw Ant-Man, the movie. And I thought it was going to go well until I said the word penis and vagina. And then, he just almost fell on the floor laughing. And we had a family next to us with older kids that would understand what a penis and vagina were. And I just felt bad for them, because I don't think they signed up for that, hearing a dad talk, and this little 6-year, I had to talk with him, I think I was 6 or 7, and he's just like, penis, it's like, shh, so I thought maybe I blew it. I was like, well, maybe I called this one wrong, but it worked out, thank God.
So you ever see Carl in a restaurant with his kids, don't go there.
It's safe now.
Yeah. Carl, you mentioned a concept when we were talking about bringing you guys out here, and we were exploring what would be good to bring up to parents. What stuff is going to talk about. You mentioned a concept called scaling in relation to technology, such as phones, social media, that genre of areas. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So again, I see a lot. My wife sees it more from an educator perspective and a parent perspective. I see a lot of things from the back end, if you will, helping a lot of men deal with sexual issues, pornography addiction, that sort of stuff. And you hear their stories and how things happened, and it doesn't take too long to see a lot of commonalities, right? And so what I've heard, what I've seen mostly, is that a lot of parents they usually fall to one of two extremes. Either it's open access, way too quick, which is a terrible idea, right? They give their 12-year-old Pandora's box and tell them good luck. That's a bad idea. And usually this one's more obviously in Christian circles, I'd say, but they go the other extreme, where they just try to lock everything down. No, you can't have a social media account. No, you can't have this. No, you can't have that. Your phone has to be locked down until you're 18. And then the child grows up feeling like trapped, and their friends make fun of them. And not that you ever make a decision as a parent based on what your peers say, but you have to factor it in, because your kids have to deal with their peers prodding them and saying, what's wrong with you? What are you, a loser? Like these are the things they hear at school. So for us, what we've always done is I say scaling because it's as they grow, right? And that just doesn't apply to technology. It also applies to the talks, right? There's not one sex talk. There's many sex talks.
Okay.
All the time, right? You're just constantly talking about this stuff. I didn't talk about masturbation the first time I talked with Hunter. Thank God, because I don't even know where that would have gone, right? But we did have that talk eventually. And we've had talks about But with technology, it's the same thing. We gave our kids their first device was a Chromebook, both of them, and we chose a Chromebook because a Chromebook basically is only good if it's online, right? So they can't really download. I mean, it does have a hard drive, but it's kind of clunky, right? I mean, Chromebooks are like half a computer, but they work. And Google they have fantastic family controls if you use Google Family. I mean, they're legit. If you dive into the weeds and learn how to use it properly, it's really powerful stuff. So we used Chromebook and a lot of restrictions. And then we slowly loosened restrictions where we thought it was appropriate. Then they got iPhones. Trust me, when they first got their iPhones, they were locked down. And our daughter got it before our son. And we didn't care about, Mia got it. Hey, you're not as old as Mia. Shut up. Get back to me in 2 years then we'll talk, right?
That's the New Jersey directness there.
I think actually when Mia first got her iPhone, we set it up so that you would get every text message
Oh,
she
yeah.
got. And that was like done very quickly
Yep.
because she was a
Yep.
12-year-old little girl and it was like,
Yep.
I can't take all of this
Yep.
silly text
I got
message.
every message. Like it would carbon copy me a copy of everything she said.
We just wanted to make sure she was making good decisions.
Yeah, and then even with social media, it was the same thing. Certain social media platforms, we just said no, not ever. Like Snapchat, forget that.
Or TikTok. they
Or
can't-
TikTok, we don't.
So why those two? You're like they're off limits. Why those two?
Well, I think that TikTok just rots your brain. But there's also a lot of stuff on TikTok. I mean, it is a platform where it can really get dicey quick. And there's a lot of studies out there to talk about online predators. And yeah, TikTok and it's also controlled by the by the Chinese.
Yes.
Not that I have anything against Chinese people, but it is controlled by a Chinese business.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen that in the news and all that.
Yeah.
And Snapchat, I mean, maybe some of it's just me being old, but I don't see the value in a platform where you can send something that disappears. I mean, it doesn't take too long to draw. Like, what's the advantage of that? Like, why do you need it to disappear? I mean, just that in and of itself, the whole purpose of the platform, is like, that is bizarre to me. I mean, you're using that platform because you want to hide something, so clearly no. But kids don't use Facebook, and if they do, it's just a front, right? They might set up a Facebook account to fool you, but no one's using Facebook. But for real.
Except for us. Well, me.
Well, no, I mean, old people use Facebook, but kids don't use Facebook unless it's just to fool you. And then Instagram, like Mia got Instagram before Hunter, for sure, because she's older. But even with Instagram, it was, we set it up with a parent supervisory account. And it's private. You can't accept friends unless we say okay, and we just slowly loosened the restrictions as we saw them build trust and responsibility. But if we didn't think it was time, we wouldn't loosen that. And I think this is really important, but it's as we either had to tighten or loosen down restrictions, and sometimes you learn through your mistakes, what was really key was just constantly reinforcing to them, I'm not doing this to punish you or because I don't trust you, I'm doing this to protect you. Right? It's because I care about you. So this could cause a problem for you, and I really don't want you to learn the hard way. But we can talk about this down the road, and if you disagree with me, sure, we can talk about it. I'm not just going to shut you down. I want to hear your arguments. I think our daughter, she went in Pinterest in her first, no. And then she said, but I want to look up recipes. And okay, fine. And that's all she did. She looked up recipes.
So what about like TVs in rooms, phones, laptops? Yeah, what are your guys' take on that? What are your thoughts around parental controls? Yeah, those areas.
So the one thing we do have on our 16-year-olds is that their phones are in their rooms when they go to bed because it's off to time like an alarm clock, but Hunter can't access certain things after 10 o'clock, like Instagram is blocked, he can't get on Safari, so his phone becomes a lot more limited. I mean, Mia's 19 and she just finished college where she had all this freedom, as much as you can at a Christian college, but she still had freedom. So we've obviously kind of given her a lot more leeway since she's come home. But we don't have TVs. That's just my personal thing. We are like unusually close family. We do live and die by Philadelphia sports. So like that is something that our family, the Phillies are on, we're all watching it. That's just something. So we are very close, and I'm very thankful for that. Like our kids don't fight us on that. They don't ask for a TV in the room. Our son does play video games, that's in the basement, and we just probably allowed him to start playing online last year, but he plays online with his friends, and then they have FaceTime down, but they're not even looking at each other because they're just talking. Like, it's bizarre. Like, they're looking at each other's ceilings while they're playing Call of Duty. But it's not like that, and we just did that with him, was he's allowed to play that. And again, that kind of goes back with the slowly releasing control. And Hunter did, we just took Instagram away from him for a little bit because there was just some things that Carl needed to talk to him about. And that was just, and then we explained it, and we even told him to his friends, because we didn't want him to feel embarrassed. We just said, you're spending too much time on it, just tell your friends that. And he got it back within probably 3 weeks. But it's just constantly being aware of just what's out there. And I think because of what Carl does for a living, our kids are kind of aware that we are protecting them. Hunter belongs to an organization called Young Life, so when he has his boys' Bible studies, the conversation of porn comes up often. And it's funny because Hunter kind of takes it as pride, like he can talk on this because of his dad, and his dad's ministry. But our kids fortunately know that we're doing this to protect them because they know that we know what can happen online, and we don't want them to go down a path that it'll be really difficult to come back from. So,
yeah, I would say just you get to know the devices. Be strategic. Like I said, Google Family is great. Screen time for iOS, really good. Really good if you learn how to use it right. I mean, you can customize it so much. It's insane. The crazy thing is, we have gone their entire, and I'm not saying that filtering or blocking or using like something like Circle, which is kind of like a firewall, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying those things aren't helpful. You can definitely use them, and they're a little simpler sometimes because you don't have to learn 5 different platforms, mm-hmm. or you just learn one. But honestly, we raised both kids with 0 filters. We just used the proprietary controls that were already available, and they actually are really robust if you learn how to use them properly. So Hunter having his phone in his room at 9 o'clock, I'm not worried because there's controls, right?
You also, when he got his iPhone at first, you can disable Safari completely, so he had no internet browser in the beginning. Okay. That was another thing that kind of got scaled, which, what did the one boy say?
Yeah, so talking about peers again, this is how young kids think these days. So he was having a conversation with somebody at school, a friend of his or acquaintance, whatever, and I don't know if it was sports related. It was something completely off topic, but they asked Hunter to look it up on his phone. He says, well, you just look it up here on your phone. And Hunter said, oh, I don't have Safari. And the kid's response was, well, how do you look up your porn? That was literally his first response. How do you look up porn? And Hunter said, I don't. And then they started making fun of him. But luckily, Hunter has a good enough sense of self that he doesn't take it personal. He's just like, okay, you're an idiot. You don't understand, right? Mm-hmm. So he's pretty good that way. But yeah, I mean, he didn't have Safari for a while. And then when he got Safari, we limited adult websites. Well, actually, when he first got back to Chromebook, when he first got a Chromebook, you have to have a browser because that's how it operates. But with Google Family, you can block everything and just whitelist certain sites. So there was 30 different sites that we whitelisted that we knew he'd be fine. But Google wasn't whitelisted. Okay. So if he typed in Google, the search bar, the homepage would come up. But the minute he typed in anything, it creates a new hash or a new URL, and so it will block. Okay. So, so just get to know the technology, and then you can rest a little easier at night. Yeah. Hey, you can take your phone up in your room because you know that social media apps shut down at 10 p.m. Or you can put time limits on them. I just did that because of Hunter's it wasn't anything serious, but because of some poor choices he made that we talked through. Instagram is now an hour a day. And that's something you can set up through screen time. And it's, hey, Hunter, you got an hour. I don't care when you burn it, but when it's done, it's done. Don't bother me. You're not getting more. And it's, he hasn't bothered me. So he's learned how to use it within the hour.
So it just sounds like the importance of, setting that boundary and sticking to it. And sometimes that's hard for us, but obviously it helps. I think kids want boundaries, right, for the most part.
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of what she said earlier about experimentation and just sometimes you're going to get it wrong, but you have to, there needs to be a little risk. Like you need to be willing to take little risks. If you tell your child, hey, I'm doing this to protect you, let's see how it goes, and then your kid is a trooper and nails and does everything the right way and shows tremendous responsibility, you can't then turn around and say, yeah, let's come back to me in 2 more years. I'm not comfortable with this. Like you have to be willing to take just a little risk, take a gamble on your kids' responsibility, their sense of integrity, what they've shown you, and see what happens. Now that doesn't mean you take a risk, wipe your hands of it, and say, I think I'm good. No, you still keep an eye on it, right? I still keep an eye on Hunter stuff here and there. But you got to reward, that's scaling. Yeah. You got to reward their faithfulness. Okay, you did good. We're going to give you a little more here. Don't push it. And it just slowly. And, I think it's worked out pretty well for us at least. We've done pretty well, minimal. They've been made fun of a little bit, sometimes here and there, but minimal, right? They've still stayed kind of in pace with everybody else, and I don't think our kids feel like they're super sheltered, so it's worked out.
That's awesome. And there's no age limit connected to that, would you say, of when you should give the kid at what age Instagram or like
emotional maturity? Like that's
a barometer?
Yeah, even with like when you're going to talk to them about sex. I mean, some kids might have the intellectual maturity or emotional maturity to talk about masturbation at 10. Some might not have it till 13. Okay. It's all dependent upon the child. So, yeah, I'd say you just got to go off of the child themselves and what they show you.
Yeah, because every kid is different and every context is different, yeah. What are the dangers of subtle or normalized pornographic images like lyrics and songs, music, video, TV shows? What are some of the subtle dangers in normalizing some of these things? Like, or is there even?
So first of all, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely a danger, if you will, and it's absolutely something that should be concerning. Our society, it's very sexualized. Sex sells, that's not just a slogan, it's true. Everything is sexualized. But I would say if you're having conversations with your child all along, you're explaining things as you go along, you're having open conversations, not just about sex, but about, we've had multiple talks with our kids about language, things like that. If you just have these conversations and explain to them we don't really use wrong and right
language.
Yeah, we don't really use good, bad, wrong, right language. That's not that we don't think there's a wrong and a right, don't get me wrong. But we don't want to create a sense of shame, so we tend to use words like appropriate, inappropriate, helpful, not helpful, healthy, unhealthy, those sorts of things that are kind of motivated, right? I don't want to say it's wrong, it's unhealthy. Do you want to be unhealthy? Well, no. Okay. So we kind of use those terminologies, but if you're having these conversations along the way, at least for us, it's a little like, we don't lose sleep at night about that stuff. Our son listens to a lot of rap, right? And our daughter, she listens to, she's got a wide variety. She loves Broadway. Then she also likes Nicki Minaj. And then she also likes some music I like Metallica and things like that. So wide variety. But, my son, when he has the opportunity, he will download the edited version. So it cuts out all the curse words and there's been a couple times when he'll play something and he'll play stuff in the car with us. And there's been a couple times where something comes up and I'm like, dude, I didn't know, Dad. I listened to the edited version. I'm like, you don't need to listen to that. Yeah. So we have good talks about it. We don't punish him or shame him for it. It's just like, this is garbage. Come on, man. Yeah, you're right, Dad. You're right. I didn't know. So I think if you're having those conversations along the way, it's a little less concerning because you help your kids understand this isn't necessarily the best thing, right? But you also don't want to just shut it all out. Like, I'm not going to say to my son, you can't listen to rap. He likes rap. But some rap's just garbage.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not good for you. And with movies, I mean,
Well, I would say we use Common Sense Media. Like,
Yeah.
that's our gauge. We'll go on there to see about what that says. Obviously, like, kind of with each of our children, we're going to be a little bit more conservative, I feel like, with Hunter, because he's younger, when it comes to, like, stuff with sex, than it is with Mia, because she's older. And also, it's different parenting a girl than a boy. But if we read it, like, so, for example, we love Marvel, too. That's our other thing that we really love, Philadelphia sports and Marvel. So we personally watched the series Daredevil, and then we let Mia watch it. And Hunter's 16 now, so we said he could watch it, but we always have the remote close, so that if it's something that we feel is not appropriate for him, you know, we fast forward through it. But that's just kind of our go-to. For us, you can judge us if you want, but for us, like, violence is not a deal breaker for us. The language is not a deal breaker for us, because he's going to hear, I know our kids go to our son goes to public education. I know he's hearing way worse in the halls than he's going to hear on a movie. But sex is really the thing that is a barometer for us, is for when she was younger, for both of them, like, that would be a deal breaker. If it was too sexual, no. You know, that's what we would read about the most.
yeah, and for our daughter, I'd say violence. So, like, it goes back to, you gotta look at each kid differently. They're different human beings. They have different things make them tick. Biologically, science, and I'm not going to get into the science, but I mean, biologically speaking, a boy's brain is different than a girl's brain, and they're wired differently, visually and everything else. So you have to be alert to that, or aware of that in terms of sexuality and things like that. Girls tend to be more prone to hookups and hookup culture and things like that than boys. Boys are more, generally speaking, porn and masturbation are the bigger issues, right? So you have to kind of factor all that in. But for her, yeah, she has OCD, and a lot of it is compulsions or obsessions with death, right? Worrying about someone dying. So for us, like, Hunter will watch a show with me that has some violence in it, and it's not crazy over the top violence. I mean, don't get me wrong, but like gun violence, things like that. He likes action movies like I do. I'm a big action movie guy. So he'll watch it, and my daughter would say, "Why didn't you invite me?" I'd say, "No, because you'll have a nightmare." And, okay, Dad, you're right. You know, so we're more tighter with violence with her than him because of her OCD, but definitely more tighter with him when it comes to sexuality than her. So she's seen all the Defender series on Marvel. She's seen Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, unfortunately. That one was terrible. She never wanted to watch the sequel to that one. She's like, no more Iron Fist. That's awful. But she's seen them all. Punisher. He's only seen Daredevil. I mean, I love Punisher. I'd love him to see Punisher. I love the guy that plays it. Way too much sex in it, you know. So, and also usually when it comes to movies and TV, we'll watch it with them. At least the first time, like, "Oh, Hunter, you want to see an action movie? Okay, I'll watch it with you." So we watch it together. I never give him, if it's like a PG-13 or even a soft R, I would never just say, "Oh, go have fun." I looked at Common Sense Media. It looks okay. Like, I want to, because they can make mistakes. So I'll sit with them and I'll watch it, you know. So we've watched John Wick. Yeah. Judge me. Judge me, but we've watched John Wick. But, you know, and in the one where there was a little raciness, fast forward it. Yeah, so.
Sometimes the exposure to pornographic content is innocent, such as stumbling upon a scene in a show or a line in a book unexpectedly. How can we navigate this learning experience without installing shame? I know you touched on it earlier, but if you can elaborate a little more on that. How can you help not shame a kid just because they stumble upon something?
Yeah.
What would be a good way to enter into that conversation?
So it's funny, the choice of words, sometimes. And I would say, in my opinion, it's really, at least in terms of first exposure, I would use the word innocent. That's the word you use, innocent, right? No, unintentional, right?
Unexpected.
Unexpected. So I would say all the time, right? That happens. Now, there's a difference between intentional and unintentional. They might intentionally look up something because they heard about it at school versus their friend flashing them a phone saying, hey, look at this. Because that could happen. That's completely. But I would say they're both unexpected, innocent, I would say. Most kids, your 12-year-old is not looking up porn because they purposely want to disappoint you, the Lord, and their future wife, right? Like, they're not thinking through that. It's, oh, my friend told me to look up this, and I'm going to go check it out because I'm curious. And that's how the human brain works. Boys, especially, when they're in their adolescence, they're very dopamine-driven, and it's all about novelty and excitement. Like, that's just how kids are wired. So tell them about something new. Tell them it looks super cool. They're going to probably look it up, right? And then they're going to find out the hard way. So, you got to be aware of that. So I'd say it's always not unintentional necessarily, but always innocent to a degree. And then in terms of removing the shame, and this is something we've talked about with our kids multiple times, is I just constantly tell, especially my son, I'm always telling my son, hey, look, you might do something that's not a good idea. I only ask you tell me. I'm not going to punish you necessarily. Well, I'm not going. I will tell him I will not punish you. I just want you to be honest with me and let's have the conversation. Doesn't mean there won't be consequences, but I don't say punishment. It's like consequences in terms of measures to create boundaries that are going to better safeguard you, right? I'm not doing this to show you like, oh, you were a bad kid, so I'm doing this to you. It's like, no, this was a very poor decision. I want to make sure you don't do this again, so we're going to draw some boundaries, right, for your health. But I always say to them, just tell me. We had that talk when we talked about masturbation the first time. I said, you might decide to do it. Most boys do. All I'm saying is when it happens, just talk to me about it. Well, it'll be fine. Like, no one's going to die. I'm not going to say you're a bad kid. I just want to talk through it because there's some consequences that you need to understand. Yeah.
And I like that openness because I think then that by you engaging in that way, it removes that shame factor of I'm being judged or I'm going to be in trouble, but it's more about, and I like the language that you use about creating boundaries to help protect you and for you to have a healthy boundaries for yourself. And just engaging in that kind of approach, I just think is so helpful.
I think also with this is like Carl, especially with Hunter, but we always try to bring it back to like, God designed sex. God designed all of these things for a reason and a purpose. And he always tries to make sure it goes back to, this is why God created it this way. This is why God really wants you to wait to have sex until you're married because of the chemicals and the way our body works. And so it's not just you shouldn't do this because we say it's wrong. You shouldn't do it because it's not healthy. This is not the way God designed us to be. But when you mess up, we're going to help you get through it. And because of Carl's story, I think our kids do feel open because he's very open about the struggles that he had and the way that he had to work through to be able to fix his brain. So I guess that's an advantage that we know that we can talk to our kids regarding like just the physicality of what this can do.
Yeah, it's kind of on topic with what you're asking, but this happened obviously when they were older, and it had nothing to do with unintentional exposure. But I'd say a really good thing is always lead. You lead the way. So lead with vulnerability, lead with transparency. I know I've had friends of mine who are parents who they would never admit to their kids that they used to look at porn because they don't want their kids to look down upon them. And so they want to portray this image of absolute integrity that, quite frankly, they can't really own, right? Because, they made mistakes. We all make mistakes. So I would say it's really important to lead with the fact that we're all vulnerable, we're all human, we all make mistakes. And I've made some of the same mistakes you've made. In fact, I always tell my kids, one of the worst things for you growing up is that I'm your dad because I've done all the dumb stuff. So I kind of know the BS when you tell me it. Like I can sniff it out because I've done all the lies. I know all the tricks mostly. Now, granted, I'm older, so maybe I don't know all the tricks, but I know quite a few. So I always tell my kids, if you want to try to pull one over, it's going to be a little harder because I've probably done it. But yeah, two quick things. I talk about it in depth, so I'm not going to go in depth. I talk about my book in depth, but two significant events for me with my kids, which really set the stage for a lot of great conversations. When I told my daughter that I used to look at porn, that was awful. The hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. We were at a Phillies game, of all things.
Philadelphia sports.
Yeah, we were at a Phillies game, just her and me, daddy, daughter, and some guy starts blowing up my phone who used to go to our old church. And he's asking me, the guy's like 32, and he literally types, "Hey, I'm looking at bad stuff. How do I stop?" I'm like, I don't know what 32-year-old calls it bad stuff, but whatever. So I'm trying to explain to him via text, bro, it's more than just filtering. We've talked about this multiple times, man. Like, I could tell you a filter to download. It's not going to help you. So I'm trying to have a conversation and end it quickly, because I've had this conversation with him 5 times, and I know the 6th time's not going to be any different. But my daughter's looking over my shoulder, and so she sees the name, and she's like, "Is that such and such?" I was like, yeah. He went to our church, right? Yes. He's a Christian. He looks at porn? Yes, Christians look at porn. They do? And I think, how old was she, 15 maybe?
Yeah, she's a freshman in high school.
Yeah, they look at porn? Yeah. And she said, "Dad, did you ever look at porn?" And I so wanted to lie. I'm not going to lie. Because I'm in the middle of a game. I didn't want to have this talk right then. I so wanted to lie and say no. But I can't do it. I tell everybody else to be honest. How can I turn around and be dishonest? So I said, yeah, I used to look at porn. And then she immediately broke down bawling in the middle of a Phillies game with everybody around
she
us.
said, "Does Mom know?"
Yeah, does Mom know? I said, yeah, Mom knows. And but to this day, she'll say to me things like, "Yeah, Dad, if you could tell me that you looked at porn, then I can tell you this." So, that was a huge, it's crazy to think of it that way, but honestly, that's probably an event in our life, one of the greatest events in my life with my daughter that brought us the closest, was my willingness to be honest about my mistakes. And then with my son, when we had the masturbation conversation, and please don't model me, I'm just saying what I did. Maybe this was stupid. You can judge, okay? But I asked him about masturbation. "Have you heard about masturbation?" "Well, I've heard about it." "Okay. Do you know anything about it?" "No." I said, "All right, well, let me tell you about the first time I masturbated." And, yeah, that's how I started the conversation. And, he was just, I can't believe my dad's going to tell me, this is so awkward. My dad's talking about the time that he masturbated. And, so we got into it. And then I got in dumbed down, I guess that was 3 years ago, 13-year-old terms or 12-year-old terms, the brain science, and I tried to relate it to, his world and how this can serve as a means of escape when you're having a bad day, and and we had a great talk. And so he feels really safe talking to me about sex and dating and all that stuff, because
But even in that, you went back to why God does, that's not something that God wants us to do, because of going back to your
healthy
relationship
it's just
with
not
God.
it's not healthy. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help your brain. Do you want to, as a 13-year-old, he could understand. I said, hey, and I went through the whole thing and broke it down to basketball terms. I said, when you come home and you shoot baskets, when you have a bad day, what do you like to do? "I like to shoot baskets." I said, great. I said, well, the way your brain's designed, if you masturbate, you're going to realize it's one of the best feelings in the world. And you can't lie. You can't, you just got to be honest. It's it's pretty amazing. I'm not going to tell you, son, an orgasm is ridiculous. But at your age, your brain's smart, and it wants more of the good thing. And when it realizes how good it is, it's eventually your brain's gonna say, when you come home and you have a bad day, your brain's gonna say, well, you could shoot baskets, but you know what you really could do? Remember that thing you did 2 weeks ago? How great was that, right? And eventually that's gonna be your go-to. And I said, so do you think what do you think's healthier? Coming home when you had a bad day, shooting baskets, working on your basketball game, or coming home, running up the stairs, locking the door, turning off the lights, and hoping your dad doesn't catch you while you masturbate? He said, oh, yeah, that's not healthy. I said, exactly. So we've had those talks.
So you gave him an understanding of the impact and all, like the meaning behind it. It wasn't just don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
the health consequences, and again,
Yeah.
not wrong or sinful or immoral. It's just not healthy,
Right.
you know. And I also gave him not the out, but I also said, you might choose it to do someday. You know, if you do, let's just talk about it.
Right.
That's it. You know,
And keeping that door open. Keeping
yeah,
that
it'll be a
space.
safe time. Just
Yeah.
let's just talk it through. We'll figure it out, and that's it.
And this one kind of goes along with that a bit, but how can parents facilitate discussion around a changing bodies conversation, emotions with their kids without linking them to pornography or sexualization?
I think that goes back to starting the conversation early. Again, making it not an awkward conversation. Our daughter, as open as she is now with her dad, she didn't ever want him to know that she got her period. She was so, I don't want dad to know. And I think you finally said something to her when she was 17, like Mia. I know you have your period, or your mom would have taken you to the doctors because that's concerning. And she's become more open about things, but again, it's just setting that stage. And if you didn't do it yet, it's okay. You just need to start the conversation as soon as possible, because I just think the earlier it is, the less awkward they feel. I teach 7 and 8-year-olds. They will tell you anything, and they will talk about anything. So that's a great time to start,
Okay.
because they are very open.
Okay.
Your child's teacher knows everything about you, because I know everything about my students.
Getting the teacher's inside scoop here.
And those conversations are going to look a little different, obviously, between boys and girls. But I think the two things that we've tried to do, and I can't give you a speech, right? I wouldn't do that, but kind of the culture, if you will, of the conversations that we try to have is we always try to come back. Try to come back to the idea of this is natural, or this happens, right? So body's changing. That's nothing to feel ashamed of. It's natural. And some people's bodies change faster than others. And that's also natural. Doesn't mean you're weird or they're weird. It just happens. So, and emotions, you mentioned emotions. Hey, you feel this way? That's natural, right? Emotions are a thing we have to deal with, right? So just trying to really stress the natural element of this stuff. And again, not natural stuff can be problematic if we don't handle it the right way, but trying to help them understand the natural aspects of biology, of their emotions, of their psychology, if you will. And then at the same time, trying to make sure that we instill, especially with Mia, this is not so much a problem with my son, but with girls, especially body image, that's a big thing, obviously, in our culture. And so just trying to instill the idea of your identity and your worth are entirely separate from your biology, right? Just however you look, that doesn't change your worth. What people think of you doesn't change your worth. And we just constantly try to reinforce that, so they understand that's important.
Right.
Now, with my son, it's not, boys, that's not such a big deal. Although he does go to the gym, which I'm so thankful for. And we were talking the other day, and he was getting really good gains. And I said to him, man, a year from now, you are going to be ridiculous. And he says to me, this is via text, and he texts me back, he says, just tank tops for me, Dad. and I just texted back, bro, don't be that guy. And then he laughed, because he knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. But don't be that guy. You don't want to be the tankless, the tank top guy at 20 degrees because you want to show off your pythons. Come on, man. Come on.
Well, I wanted to remind you all too, on your tables there's a Q&A that's going to happen at the end. So I want you to be thinking about questions that you want to ask us at the end, because there'll be Q&A. So be thinking about it. There's instructions are right there on the. I think it's right there on the QR code, and you can type in your questions, and then I'll have somebody shoot them up here for me. So be thinking about them, because we definitely didn't cover everything that happened here, or that's out there, or a question that you may have, and it's all incognito, so we're not gonna know who asked the question. It'll just come in. So ask anything. I hope that's okay. This one, I think this is a good question here. It's important for parents. Is it important for parents to display affection around their children? Why or why not?
Our kids would probably say no, but yes. I grew up in I grew up in a very loving home, so I saw affection from my parents. Carl did not see that so much. His family is a little dysfunctional. So our kids, like, we joke about it, but I think it's super important for our children to know that we love each other and that we do display affection. Now, we're not disgusting. Like, that's gross. We're not PDA people, except when we're joking and trying to make them mad at us. But I think it's super important for them to see that we love each other. But yeah, his parents, there was none of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, just, yeah, within limits, right? Yeah. Unless, again, you're just trying to gross them out, and which I am way worse with that.
He really enjoys trying to gross
Yeah, I'm
our
way
children
worse than that
out.
with her. Like, Carl, I'm sorry, so I definitely push the limits sometimes just because I enjoy my daughter's comments like, ew, Dad, come on, what's wrong with you? So, but again, honestly, I think even just not the fact that it's important for your kids to see that you love them, the fact that we're kind of open about topics related to sex and joking around about it, not that sex is necessarily a joking manner or a joking thing, but you can't be too serious about it, right? You need to have like an open hand with it. So, no pun intended. So, you need, sorry, but you.
That's the jersey.
That's the jersey.
That's the jersey coming up.
But you just need to. If they're, hey, you know what? This is a topic that we can kind of joke about. It's not this thing that we put on a pedestal that's taboo that we can't mention, right? So we joke about it partially to gross them out, partially to let them know that we really do love each other and it's not all big fraud, but also partially to just reinforce the idea that, again, this stuff's kind of natural and we don't have to hold our arms out. Like, we can kind of talk about this stuff and joke about it a little bit, as long as it's obviously within reason.
Right.
And I think that's paid off too. Our kids kind of know where to draw a line. Our son, not so much. Sometimes I gotta be like, oh,
Reel
yeah,
him in?
yeah, sometimes.
What are some recommended resources for parents regarding sex and parenting, as well as resources for teens? I know we probably we have some shots on that there in the PowerPoint. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, Carl.
Yeah. And the only reason I'm speaking to it is because I'm the one that so that's the She Deserves Better. So that's Canadian.
Yep.
Sheila Gregoire.
She's from
Canadian,
Toronto.
so that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So Sheila's, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna say I agree with everything Sheila says, but Sheila's pretty good, and that's written directly towards mothers and daughters, and really gets into victim blaming and things like that. Like, it's great. It's great, especially for girls entering those dating years. It's really good. It gets into like toxic masculinity, things like that. Yeah. Really good stuff. So that's great. The other one, what's it called? I can't read it, but that's Dr. Joe Malone, PhD.
Battles of the Sexes.
Yeah, brilliant guy. He's actually focused on, he works a lot with women in sexual health. Hookup culture is a big thing that he talks about a lot. And that book was really written for women, but he says guys buy it all the time. And it's really good because he gets into basically the scientific, if you will, or practical reasons that monogamy and these sorts of things are actually a good thing, and why hookup culture is actually a really destructive thing for you, right, as a person. Mm-hmm. My book, and that's just a shameless plug. So, nope. It's good, too.
Yeah.
And then Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, that's obviously for younger kids. I'm not going to lie, I never read it, but I know a lot of people who have, and Fernando apparently paged through it. And I told Fernando this. I said, I've never read it because I can't get past the title, because that's just not how we talk about things.
Yeah,
like,
tell him a little bit, though, about why that was a little bit, you didn't love the title, but why that reasoning can be a problem sometimes.
Yeah, so, I said, the good, that goes back to right, wrong, bad, good, so when you talk about good pictures, bad pictures, that can be a problem too.
Yeah.
Now, from what I understand, the author did that kind of a tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Because that's the
I
way...
think it was a hook.
Yeah, that's the way most parents will talk about it, is, that's a bad picture.
Yeah.
And so, but the problem with that is, again, when you say good and bad, it can definitely create a lot of shame, because if your kid sees a bad picture, does that make them a bad kid, right?
Yeah.
It's an inappropriate picture,
Yeah.
or it's a picture that shouldn't have been out there.
It actually addresses that in the book.
Okay, good.
Which is great.
But I've heard a lot of good things about the book, and it's got a lot of good reviews.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good book.
Yeah, and there's a junior one, and then there's another one.
Right.
And we have just a hard copy of one out there, and then we have a link that will link you when you go out the door to the book.
Yep.
It's really good. Like when I look through it, so I would recommend it for sure.
I don't think you have any books per
For
se.
younger kids.
But and this is what I told Fernando when we talked beforehand. From my perspective, because we do something called office hours on Triple X Church. We used to do it. I mean, we're changing things with the website, so it's going to be a little different now. But basically, people would submit questions, and then I would answer them on video, unedited, just kind of off the. So I'm being honest, right?
Yeah.
Like, and get a lot of questions from parents about things, and a lot of questions about what's a good resource. And my answer is always the same thing: you're the best resource. You are the best resource for your kids. So being honest with them, being available to them, being willing to have conversations. You being available and willing to talk about this stuff will do so much more benefit for them than just reading a book, right? That is information, but unless you put that information into practice, it's completely useless. You're the best resource, absolutely. And that means that they're going to probably come to you and ask you things that you don't necessarily know the answer to. That's okay. Right? We don't need to be Superman or Superwoman. You just say, and I've had kids, my kids ask me a question. I'll get back to you. I don't know. Let me look at that. Let me look into that, right? But you're the best resource. If they feel safe with you, my gosh, like you've accomplished, honestly, that's it.
That's a big part
That's
about
it. If your kids feel safe with you, it's really going to be hard to mess it up, right? You might get some things wrong, for sure. We all do. But being available to them is way better than any curriculum, any book, any course. Just, hey, I don't know it all, but I want to talk about it. And being willing to wrestle through tough conversations.
Yeah.
Way better.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any resources you would advise parents to avoid discussing topics like sex and purity and pornography with your children or teens?
Any book that starts with the word every. Any book that starts with the word every.
Every?
And ends with battle.
Okay.
I'll just put that. I don't want to get sued. But
Okay.
any book that starts with every something battle, stay away from. Those books, that whole series of books, just, in my opinion, totally wrong, totally goes down the wrong road completely. Behavior modification focused, defining integrity by what you do, not who you are. Honestly, a lot of misogyny in there. I'm just, toxic. I've can't tell you how many people I've talked to who that was the first book they read, and it messed them up. So
How did it mess them up?
just they had a completely unhealthy view of sex, and the one book geared towards males specifically. If you read that book, whether you're a woman or a guy, you're convinced that every guy on the planet is the biggest pervert ever, and that our full-time job is just controlling our perversions. Like that's kind of the walkaway, right? That's the takeaway is we just are all these ravenous, sexualizing dogs. And our entire job as a godly man is to just figure out how to curb it with behavior strategies.
Right.
Couldn't think of a worse message to give a kid.
I think I'm getting messages.
Terrible.
Okay. So that's why you would say that those resources are not helpful because
Garbage is the word I use. Garbage.
Okay, there you go. You heard it from the New Jersey directness.
There's that jersey again.
Do you have anything to add to that? Like because you talked about the purity culture already, right? Yeah.
No, we didn't really talk about
We didn't talk. Well, let me ask it. I think I missed. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say has been helpful or not helpful with the purity culture? I think I skipped it.
So, again, our kids go to public school, and our church is not conservative. Our church isn't conservative. So I think, we raised Mia in a way that when she was little, I had boundaries as far as what she wore and everything. Not because I felt a certain way, but I just didn't want to have battles as a teenager on what she wore. So I figured I would start this is how I want you to dress. Not because of I want her to feel like she has to. I don't want her to feel self-conscious about her body. And it's not. We've had conversations like this before. Like a man is in charge of his thoughts. And you talked about like victim blaming?
Victim blaming, yeah.
But so Mia goes to, I'm sure you've heard of the University, Liberty University, and it's kind of conservative. And we aren't necessarily, I don't agree with all of the rules there. And that was really hard for her this year because they definitely fall more onto that like purity. She got, what is it called? When she got in trouble, she got
Oh yeah, she got dress coded.
dress coded because she had a midriff on in the gym, and like she doesn't wear a midriff because she's trying to show off her body, but because she's hot when she's working out. She didn't have TikTok pants on, so like that's better. I would rather have her a little bit of her tummy showing. So we've had a lot of conversations regarding that with her since that, because she just feels like that, you know, in that way they're kind of blaming her, and guys can wear the tank tops with their bodies showing. And
She got the comment, actually, so she got dress coded twice, once at the gym and once during band practice.
Yeah.
And one of the techs, I guess it was, said to her the comment.
it came from a woman too,
Oh,
honestly.
woman, yeah,
A
something
woman
to the
tech.
effect of, you know, there's young men here and we need to help protect their integrity, so you need to, you need to cover that. And my daughter was so angry.
She told me she was going to write a letter to the president.
Yeah. And
But
she
that's
was,
just not how we raised her. I mean, she has respect over her body, and we raised her in a way that she's going to show respect to herself. So she's not going to wear clothes that are too revealing, because that doesn't show respect to her, and it doesn't draw the attention that she wants. But that really, that was the first time she ever felt that type of purity culture, because we never talked about it. It was just kind of the way it was. We started at a young age, like. This was just my view with, like, I didn't let her wear bikinis when she was 3 because I didn't want to fight with it when she was 15. Like, I have no problem with a 2-piece bathing suit, but you're not going to be spilling out of it because you're going to get sunburn. Like, that's just not, I mean, truly, as a 3-year-old, like, I didn't need her skin to be exposed. But again, it was just more like starting things young so that as she got older, I didn't have to fight her. And she's pretty conservative. I'm very conservative as far as the way I dress, and so is she. So she now looks at other people and she's sometimes like, gosh, why are they wearing that? Like, why do they want to get that type of attention? Because she knows her worth is not in her body. She's a smart girl. She's got a fiery spirit, and that's where her worth is. And I always spoke over her like, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Like, God made you with a purpose, and he has a plan for you, and it's so much more than the way that you look. So.
yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any experience with purity culture per se because, my parents never talked about sex to begin with. So from my perspective growing up, that wasn't even a thing.
Because you don't talk about it.
Yeah, I learned everything from friends, which is always a great way to parent. Which is probably why I ended up doing the things I did. So, but I didn't really deal with it too much, but I have seen a lot of impact. I have seen the impact of it on a lot of the guys we help. And I think my biggest issue, not that the word purity is a bad thing, but I think my biggest issue with purity culture is what it stresses. So it's purity is, they might not say it in so many words, but purity is defined by what you do or don't do. Mm-hmm. Even what you think and don't think. And I got news for you. Like, we all think some jacked up things sometimes, and it's, thoughts. Like, sometimes thoughts you don't have any control to a degree. Sometimes a thought will come into your head, and you have to wrestle with that thought. Right? Just because you have a thought doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's what you do with that thought. Oh, that's a weird thought, right? And my daughter and I have talked a lot about thoughts because of her OCD. It's like, hey, you're going to have these weird thoughts. I have weird thoughts sometimes, and I just put it aside. And I think purity culture, the problem is it really, hey, if you do this or if you think this, you're a good person, you're a pure person. And so I talk about this in my book too, but I prefer the word integrity. There's a lot more wiggle room there. But I will say this, integrity's kind of, in Christian circles, I would say, become the new buzzword because purity culture has taken such a hit, in many ways rightfully so. So now integrity is the new buzzword. But we've just kind of put a new wrapping on the same old gift because it's still, integrity is what? Well, it's, doing what you believe. And it's still defined in many ways when you hear people talking, but what you do. And integrity, when you think of the word integrity comes from the Latin word integer, which means whole, right? And if you understand it, like if you approach it from kind of a brain science way, it's the idea of everything working together as one, right? There's a part of our brain, the midbrain, that's our feelings and emotional area. And listen, if we all do what we feel, that's part of the reason our world is so jacked up, right? Because so many people just work off of what they feel, not what actually makes sense or is good. So you have that, but that's a real part of your brain. And then you have your high brain, where you have your values and your logic. And in an integrated brain, right, those things work together. Hey, I had this thought. I kind of feel like this. That's not a good idea. Oh, not sexual, but hey, I'm driving in traffic. This is my problem. Someone cuts me off. The thought comes in my brain. I want to punch that guy. High brain comes in. If you punch that guy, you're going to jail. And then I still have to weigh it out sometimes, depending on the degree of the infraction. Like if it's a really obnoxious cutoff, I have to really wrestle with that, okay? I'm not going to lie. But, it's like that's an integrated brain,
yes.
Right? We're balancing it out. We're having the boxing match. Hey, this sounds good. It's not a really good idea. Oh, yeah. That's integrity, right? So it's acknowledging that you have these things, but you also have values. And trying to make sure that your behaviors reflect your values, not because you force the issue, but because you really do want to act in a way that reflects what you believe. And you really do want to act in a way that is going to help you advance towards your goals, right? And I think purity culture and all that stuff really misses the mark there, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
And we get guys that come in our communities all the time and ridden with shame because of what they've done, or even they're 45-year-old men, 50-year-old men posting about how, like, the most shameful, self-condemning thought in our community because they had a thought, And what did you do? Well, I knew it wasn't a good idea, so I didn't do it. Bro, that's a win. That's a win. Why are you beating yourself up? You had a thought. It happens. We all have thoughts. You didn't act on it. Good job. Why are you beating yourself up? Right. But they've been programmed to believe because they had the thought they're a bad person.
Right. That's the bad side of, thinking about it that way. So I'm getting a ton of questions coming here. We now get to all of them. So I'm going to try to pull some of these questions here.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yes.
So I just, one thing both of us really want to communicate is, we're up here and we're answering questions. Like, we're not experts, right? Like, parenting is an adventure. It is an adventure, and like any event,
expensive adventure.
Yeah, it's an expensive adventure for sure. But it's an adventure, which means there's going to be risks, and there's going to be ups and downs, and you're going to make mistakes, and you got to kind of enjoy the ride, and you got to kind of figure it out the way you go. And my wife kind of touched on it earlier, but my definition for parenting, like, and I'm going to copyright this, I think, but it's big people trying to teach little people how to be good people while passing on as little psychological damage as possible. Because you're going to psychologically damage your kids on some level. That's a guarantee. We all will, right? But you just have to be open and willing to experiment. And really, the big thing is humility and being willing to say you're sorry. Yeah. My kids have called me out sometimes. And I've told them. Yeah, and I've told them to call me out, And, my daughter said to me, Dad, why are you flipping out? Well, Dad, that's kind of stupid. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Or they catch you in a bad moment, and you say, and you snap. Having the humility and whatever to go to them later and say, will you forgive me? I really did not react well there, and that is my bad, not your bad. You didn't do anything wrong. I screwed up. I'm sorry. Will you? And man, that carries weight. Yeah. Because if your kids see that you're willing to be honest and open and admit your faults, they're not going to be so resistant to coming to you and asking questions that they think you might disagree with them on. Because mom and dad's already, they've shown that they're willing to admit when they're wrong. So I can have this conversation. And it might not go my way, but maybe I'm going to convince them how smart I am, and they're going to say, you know what, good point. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just open-handed parenting. Just, man, it's an adventure, and run with it and see what happens. And, most of what we've learned and done, trial and error. I've read very few books on parenting. Although I would say, on top of those resources, buy yourself a good human development book, especially if you have little kids. Like high level, maybe master's, like textbook, not some author, Christian author that is put out by Zondervan or something, but like a textbook. Buy yourself a good human development textbook and read it front to back. Huge, because it'll tell you about things like I've learned going through school. There's been a lot of things I've read, and as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh man, I got that one right. I got the one right. Oh man, I blew that one. Like, because I didn't know. That's how the brain works.
Brain and how it
Oh,
works.
it's so helpful. I mean, it really helps you. So when your kid's flipping out and they're 7, and you're thinking, what is wrong with this demon child? And then you realize, at 7, this is kind of natural, right? This thing. And here's how I should react to it to get the behavior I want. Not the way I want to react is by throwing him in the same cage that our dog uses for crate training. Like, it's like, look, again, thoughts, right? You can have the thoughts, you just don't act on them. But a good human development book, honestly, I know it sounds crazy, but textbook type book, scientific, worth every penny. That'll help you a lot.
All right, I got to jump into some questions here. Some of them have kind of been answered, so I don't know if some people might have missed what you said about that, but anyway, let me try to find something here that... how do you restart these conversations? Like, say they missed it, or they didn't go, as deep into the conversations as they needed to. How do you restart conversation with older teens, young adults, when you've handled talks on having sex improperly? When we've shamed them into silence?
Yeah, that goes back to just owning it. Apologizing. I blew this. My bad. I should have known better. And I would say, not just, hey, I messed up, but being honest about why you messed up. Hey, this was an uncomfortable thing for me to talk about because my parents never talked about it with me. Throw grandma and grandpa under the bus, right? But it's like, hey, my parents never talked about me, so no one really modeled this really well, and I'm just trying to figure this out, and I kind of messed up. And so I really want to kind of start this conversation now. And I know it's really awkward trying to do this 10 years later than I should have. But if you would give me the grace and let's see how it goes. And they might, and they might not. But you got to try. But I would say lead with humility, lead with a lot of apologizing, own why you did it, let them help them understand, and be willing to also say, I read a really bad book, started with Every, and so, everything I learned was complete garbage. And so now I'm learning new stuff, and I want to try to practice that.
Yeah. This is another one here. So how do you prepare your kids for those discussions surrounding porn with their friends where there's accepted and everyone does accept it? Like, so I know you kind of touched on that with Hunter a bit, but like, how would you, if a kid gets in that conversation, for example, and all their friends are talking about all this stuff, and your kid comes back and said, obviously, I think you're right. Hunter has a little leverage because of what you do, but most people don't, right? Yeah. So how do you help your kids navigate that? Like, everybody's talking about it. They always want to talk about it.
I think Hunter just basically, because he has been asked, like, dude, why don't you look at porn? And Hunter just said, it's not my thing. Yeah. And it's kind of left it as that.
That's good. That's a good answer.
And with Mia, somehow her friends know what Carl does. Like, we're not really open with his job because we're not closed with it. It's just not something that, like, we use the word he's a pastor, and then, like, depends on who it is, we'll just say addictions pastor. When we were flying here, the guy next to us said, so what do you come to Canada for? And we said, Carl said to speak at a church. And he said, oh, what are you going to speak about? And I'm like, oh no, here we go. We're going to be on the plane with this guy for 4 hours. Because it is an uncomfortable thing. But for the most part, when Hunter said it's not my thing, most guys are like, okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think the words he'll generally use is, I'm not about that.
Yeah.
And he uses the same, that's his phrase, I'm not about that. I'm not about that life. Because vaping, as I'm sure many of you know, vaping's huge. I mean, it's crazy. When I went to school with smoking, and then a little marijuana maybe, some people, but now vaping's the thing. I mean, and it's my son's an athlete, and when I went to school, the athletes generally they were not the smokers. They understood what being an athlete meant. But these days, I mean, the athletes, they're all vaping. And they'll ask him, and he says, yeah, I'm not about that. But what we try to reinforce to him is that it's about, to a degree, goals. and what you want, right? So when Hunter and I have had talk about vaping, for instance, and it's honestly, it's a different thing, but it's the same concept. We've talked about vaping. You know, he wants to be an athlete. And I say to Hunter, I said, what is an athlete? An athlete is someone, it doesn't mean you can just pick up a basketball and dribble. An athlete's a lifestyle. It's training your body. It's eating right. It's doing these things that take care of your health. It's performing. You want to be a performance guy, right? If you want to be a good athlete, you need to increase your human performance. Vaping does not help you get there. And that's all he needs to hear. Mm-hmm. And so he does not want to touch a vape cartridge. He doesn't even want to hang out with people to touch vape cartridges.
Or date a girl. Him and his best friend, they're like, if they see a girl vaping, they're like, yeah.
Yeah, he's not about that life. And so porn's a little different, but it's the sort of same thing. Mm-hmm. It's what are you about? What are you, what do you want for your life? And this is you dabble with this stuff, it's going to give you this result. Is that what you want? No. Okay. Well, then you're not about that. And so that's just how he answers. And he really, we're lucky. I'm not going to say every kid's like this, and I'm not going to say it's always going to work out, but we are really lucky with our kids, and especially my son, is when it comes to that stuff, he's really bold. He just doesn't care. He's like, man, I'm not about that. Oh, okay, dude, you're the loser. Get out of my face. He just doesn't care.
But that's part of teaching your kids to know who they are in Christ and their image, right? Their identity is not in being liked or being the most popular, right? So that's helpful. That's a good reminder to us as parents. This question came in, what if your teen is already in, and the person said already in a tight grasp of porn and masturbation? Where do you turn to help them?
That's probably more my wheelhouse. But so we get this question a lot because it happens all the time. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with an adolescent, addiction is a clinical term, but it's also a very labeling term. So you need to be careful when you're dealing with a kid. Don't get me wrong. Clinically, biologically speaking, they may certainly be addicted because it doesn't take that long and I'm not going to get into all the brain science, but it doesn't take that long for their brains to adapt to this new thing and start to crave it, right? That there's a biological process that happens, the push-pull thing that happens in their brain, which drives their desire for a particular thing that produces pleasure. And then there's also another chemical that kind of counteracts that builds resistance. So addiction can happen, and especially in an adolescent's brain, because they don't have the braking system, if you will, to slow things down when things get out of control. Like they literally don't have the capability.
In their development.
Yeah, front brain, exactly. They don't have the GABA receptors needed. And so if you have a boy who's 15, you've probably used the words, what the heck were you thinking? And they probably answered, I don't know. And when I used to hear that, it would aggravate me. Like, oh, you're lazy. Just tell me what you were thinking. He literally doesn't know. He's like, I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea, Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, addiction can happen. So I think, again, if you find that out, first of all, you have to have the conversation. It needs to be approached from hey, this is not healthy. I want to help you here. Not, you're sinful, you're wrong, you're disobeying your parents, you're shaming, God's not happy. All that needs to go out the door, and just, this is not healthy. I want to help you. And then you got to talk through that. Being a little informed yourself in terms of the realities of addiction, quote unquote addiction, and compulsive behavior would definitely help, right? So I would say read through any book that you might give them to read that try to help them understand it. And while it might be it blows my mind that it's still a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Counseling. We were talking about in the car where how people sometimes they're reticent to go to a counselor because of the
very taboo,
stigmatizing, right?
Taboo, yeah.
Listen, there's no age too early for therapy, and that's not to say they got to go to a quote unquote shrink. It's counselor, right? Kids can use counselors. Counselors are good because it gives them a safe space, the way they're trained to be honest and talk through things, and they don't feel kind of some of the same uncomfortability that they might feel with you. Obviously, you want to give them that same level of openness, but your child might have a hard time with that. So I would definitely say if counseling is needed, don't hesitate to plug them into a counselor because, there's a very good chance they need it. So, but one thing I would also say is this: and this might be difficult. This will be difficult. Try to determine what's the nature of the compulsion that we're dealing with. Is this more of I was 11, my friend showed me breasts, I liked it, which is natural.
Yeah.
And so I wanted more of it, and now I'm kind of hooked on this because I like breasts. Or is it, my friend showed me breasts, I kind of like it, and now I tend to go look up naked pics when I'm feeling down or depressed because there's some dynamic going on in the home that makes them feel very unsafe or unloved or whatever. There's like a psychological, emotional thing behind that that's just their go-to now because of that bond that happened. That's really important. Because if it's more of like just the purely biological, you might be able to just wrestle through that without a therapist, work through that, install filters, do things to kind of make sure that you curb that because 60 days and a lot of that stuff should wash out of your system.
60 days?
Roughly. I mean, that's the number they say. 60 days for that stuff to kind of wash out, those chemicals, if you will. Mm-hmm. But if it's an emotional thing, that's not going away until they deal with it. And so even if you cure the porn issue,
Acting out.
Yeah, the acting out, they might just act out with something else. It might be vaping, it might be, hey, candy, that would be a nice one, right? But gambling, whatever. So, you need to make sure if you can, try to figure out, okay, where's this coming from? Is this an emotional issue, or is this purely, hey, I'm a kid and, my brain's wired where naked women seem kind of fun to look at? Mm-hmm. And then trying to talk through that stuff and why that's not necessarily healthy.
This one's kind of broad, but I think it's helpful. And how can we as Christians help fellow Christians walk the road of recovery rather than shaming one another? I know that's a broad.
I think having open conversations like this in the church is the biggest thing. I know on Sunday when we're going to talk, we'll talk a little bit about our story, but when I was raised in the church, when we were first married, porn was not anything that was ever talked about. So I think it's important to just continue the conversation of not making it such a taboo topic because the stats are very clear that this is not something that's just a world issue. This is a big capital C church issue. And I think oftentimes the church, it's okay to say, I'm a recovering alcoholic, but you don't want to talk anything about porn because it's uncomfortable. And there's a lot of stigma with it. So I think just things like this is so helpful. Yeah. And our son, like I said, he belongs to Young Life, and that seems teenagers are very quick. They're very easy to talk about lust and those types of things, and giving them a safe space to be able to talk about it and know that, you're not going to be judged based on what's going on. Yeah. So important.
Yeah, I get in trouble for this sometimes because people think that I'm saying something I'm not. But the reality is porn and masturbation are normal. Okay, that doesn't mean healthy. Okay, normal as in it happens generally in society. It's a normal thing. Eating fast food's normal, right? Not healthy, but it's normal, right? So it's like trying to remove that. Hey, in the church, we're willing to talk about the fact that we probably eat one too many burgers a week. Or, honestly, it's kind of crazy. It might not have been like this years ago, but people will talk about how they're living paycheck to paycheck. They don't mind talking about their finances. Alcohol and drugs, not something that people necessarily openly talk about 20 years ago. Now, no big deal, right? Because we know it's kind of normal. A lot of people do drugs. Again, not healthy. So normal's not healthy, just normal, as in a lot of people do it. So, but sex and porn, or actually porn and masturbation, those sorts of things, we want to kind of treat them as if almost that's not normal. That's very abnormal. No, man, a lot of people are doing it. And so we need to be able to kind of treat it the same way. Hey, I need to get my finances together. Yeah, you do. I need to get my health together. Yeah, you do. I need to stop masturbating 10 times a day. Yeah, you do. That's not good, right? That's the thing.
So that's what you mean by normalizing. It's like you can talk about it and you're not doing, because the big problem with it is that it's such a secret thing. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Everybody's doing it in a corner. No one knows, and they're not getting help, and it continues. Yeah. They'll for whatever, white knuckling it for a while, doing well, a couple months, and then all of a sudden they fall off the bandwagon. And now, but a lot of that is because they don't have an accountability. They're not talking about it. Because if people know, they would not like me.
Yep.
That's a big part of why we're doing this here tonight.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's all about you're just trying to be the best version of yourself, right? Who God created you to be. And so some of us, we all need help in different areas to become the best version of ourselves. There's nothing shameful about trying to become a better version of yourself. I don't care what that is, what needs tweaking, nothing shameful in that. That's a shameless pursuit. I want to be the best version of myself, so I'm going to do what I got to do to get there. And being willing to talk about it, that should be commonplace. It shouldn't be a big deal, but it is for certain topics.
I'm just trying to find one more, and then we'll probably wrap it up, because there was a lot that came in. And hold on. Okay, this one. How would you navigate your child's choosing to be sexually active before marriage? How can you help them make healthiest decisions in the midst of this choice?
So, I mean, knowing the age would be helpful, because the conversation might look a little different.
Right.
But I would say it's still the same thing. Open. When I say accepting, I don't mean saying, "Oh, that's cool, that's approving," but hey, like, okay, let's deal with this.
Because at this point, it's happened. So
Yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's not that different from. I had a conversation with my son when he started dating a girl, and she was a year older than him, and I don't know if she was. He said she's a Catholic, and we've talked about missionary dating and all that, but. You know, it was just puppy love, right? So I wasn't really going to get into it. He wasn't going to marry her, so I wasn't worried about it. But she was a year older in public school, and it doesn't take too long to figure out that there could be some sexual pressure there, right? So we talked about it. And I said, hey, look, at your age, it's natural to, if you start kissing and you want to do more, that's kind of natural. It's probably going to happen. And so you gotta put your values ahead of yourself. And where do I want to go with this? Is this really the best thing for me? And you need to decide that as early as possible, because if you get too far down the road, it's going to be almost impossible to extract yourself from the situation. Like the hormones are going to take over, and it's off to the races. But I told him, I said, ultimately, this is what I said to him. I'm not saying you need to do this. It's just what I said. But I said, ultimately, you got to make the decision not to have sex for your own benefit. Like, is this the best thing for you, right? Because that's really, in my opinion, that's the only thing that's going to get you through this. Put your goal ahead of you. Where do I want to be? Is this the best decision for me? I said, because if you try to stay pure or not have sex purely out of dad said no, mom will think less of me, God will not be happy with me. I'm not saying that because God said so isn't technically a good enough reason, but if we're being real in terms of how the human brain works, it's not going to work. Like, that's not enough. I'm doing it. I'm just willpower. Willpower, especially with an adolescent or a young man, willpower is not going to work. But if they have an idea of where they want to be in life, with their relationships, with their sex life, with anything, and they can start wrestling through those goal-oriented questions early, there's a better chance that they're going to pull away from it. So if they're already engaging in it, have the conversation. How do you think this is benefiting you? Try and explain to them kind of the drawbacks of this stuff, right? The emotional damage it can create. Do you really think that's the best thing for you? Trying to help them evaluate it from that perspective. And I mean, the reality is, and I told my son this, I said, if you decide to do it, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, what am I going to do? And I told him the same thing I told him with masturbation. If you ever decide to have sex, the only thing I ask is you talk to me about it. And let's just have that conversation, whatever it looks like. And I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, we'll just have to see where it goes. But I think that's what's in it for him. What's going to be the best version of himself? And again, vaping example, same thing. Is this really the best thing for you? No. Okay, so say no early so you don't have to worry about saying no later, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's very, very good. Okay, this one's a good one. What do you believe are healthy boundaries for kids and dating? Age, you kind of touched on this, but what's too far? But I think the bigger part of that question is there healthy boundaries when it comes to age of when kids date?
So I guess Hunter had it wasn't really his girlfriend, but he started going to youth group with a girl, and they considered themselves dating. I guess that was in 8th grade, 9th grade. And again, our kids are pretty open with us, although with that stuff, he wanted Carl to know before me. And then he just had his first girlfriend that was a little bit more serious. But like we had certain boundaries and rules about like where they were allowed in the house. They could go in the basement, the door had to be open. They had to know that we would be coming down often to check. And then we would take them places because he doesn't drive. And so we just had very specific boundaries. Same thing, and her mom kind of had the same boundaries as well as far as that. So we didn't give a specific age. Because when they're young, again, he was in 8th grade, they were dating. They went to youth group together. That was the extent of their dating. And then the poor kid, he went to youth group on Valentine's Day, and the youth pastor talked about dating Jesus, and she texted him that night and broke up with him.
But he did not become an atheist as a result. So
I'm like,
that's a win.
Man, I know.
Sold him out.
Yeah, and our daughter she hasn't really dated anyone, and now she's at a Christian university where ring by spring is a real thing, and she wants no parts of that. She is just like, knows, I wish she'd pick a major, but she knows that she's there for a reason. I mean, a major would be helpful, but she's just not about that, where some of her friends, their complete goal is to just get married. And that's it. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that that's not what Mia's goal is. So I just think you have to know your child too.
Yep.
But it's more about the boundaries when they start dating, on not just letting them go up to their room and have the door shut. You know, there are just certain things that are not going to be accepted for their own protection.
Yeah, and I would say it goes back to what you said earlier about scaling. Like, it's not so much an age thing, it's a maturity thing. Like, can they handle it? What have they shown themselves? Do you think they're in a place where they can handle this healthy? One of the proudest moments I've had as a dad with my son, this is where I knew I didn't screw him up too bad psychologically, but he was going to school, this is a couple of years ago, and girl showed interest in him. And he came home, he says, yeah, this girl kind of likes me. I said, oh yeah, is she good looking? You know, because I mean, that's how kids talk. And he says, yeah, she's kind of good looking. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, like, talk to her and see how it goes, be friends, and okay. And so I would ask him periodically, hey, what's up with that girl? She's still liking your vibe, you know? And he said, nah, Dad, we're just gonna be friends. I said, oh yeah, what happened? He said, well, she's got some psychological issues, like she. Wow. But he didn't mean like crazy. He wasn't saying it shamingly. Like, he wasn't like, oh, she's crazy, Dad. He's like, she's got some like depression issues and anxiety issues. Like, she's going to a counselor, and she really likes me. But I told her that I really didn't think that was the best thing for her mental health, and that, you know, I think she's great, but I'd like to see her invest more in her own health before we start dating. I was like, holy crap. Like, I'm putting myself in his position as a 14-year-old, and I'm thinking to myself, if that was me at 14, all I needed to know, it was a simple yes, is she hot? Yes, I'm in. I don't care about the rest of it. Like, that's how I would have been at 14. Now, granted, that don't model me, but yeah, so it blew me away that he was thinking on that level. You know, so I was like, okay, we did something right here. You know?
Well, the other thing is he'll ask first is, are you a Philadelphia Eagles fan?
Yeah, that's true.
And if she says no, like, that's it. Sorry, you're out. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, just wise boundaries, emotional maturity, and again, it all goes back to just having conversations throughout.
Yeah.
How's it going? What's been going on? What have you been doing? You know, hey.
Keep the conversation going.
Yeah, we leave the door open. When Hunter was with his girlfriend, a couple times I'd say to him, no, I mean, he could be lying to me, don't get me wrong, but I'd say, hey, listen, if I come down there one of these nights to grab something out of my office, am I going to be upset? No. I'm like, okay. You know, so it's just having that open-handed conversation on an ongoing basis and try to keep in the loop what's going on.
Well, I know someone that has a rule that, yeah, they leave the door open, and then they also go into the kids' room at any time. Yeah. They will come in uninvited. Yep. And I think that's good. if they're, you know, at the dating age or whatever you want to call it, and they're in your house, just go in the room. Like, that's the rule. I'm going to come in, so.
There's been multiple times where I just happen to have to get something out of my office. Oh, sorry, Hunter. I had to grab something.
Okay.
You know,
This-
it's a lie, but you know, God forgive me.
This was a good one here. God forgive me. It's a Rahab line. This is a good one here, and then we're going to close here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, really? Okay, well, I'm going to ask this one and then one more. Okay, that one might, okay, got to pray for that. Like, pray, Lord, help us. So this one I thought was really good because it's, different views with parents on this. How have you both navigated any differences of opinion in the timing or scope of these discussions? So that's one part. My partner and I are not on the same page about talking to children about these matters. That's a little bit of marriage and a little bit of...
Yeah. Our policy, so this is honestly more of a marital question and a parenting question.
I can
honestly.
jump in on it if you want.
Yeah, I think you can. But for us, it's just our policy is we have to be on the same page. And until we're on the same page, we don't move forward. Like, that's just our policy. So, and we have had disagreements about things, not fights or major, but just, you think? Okay, let's talk it through. And, you know, if one of us gets, and it's not an all or nothing thing. It's more of a, I don't know, usually it's more her saying, I don't know if I love this idea, but I'll roll with it if you think I trust you, right? But I won't just, when it comes to these things, it's not, I think it was your wife that said earlier about asking for forgiveness. Easier to ask for forgiveness and permission, you know. But we don't take that approach. I just threw your wife under the bus. We don't take that approach when it comes to parenting. Let's ask permission first. And yeah, you need to be on the same page. But I would also say you can't be afraid to engage the conflict or that might cause by saying, hey, look, and maybe you need to do a little studying and boning up on some studies so you have the data to back it up. But this is not healthy for our kids. Yeah. And I love our kids, and I know you love your kids, and I'm not saying you're doing this because you don't want them to be healthy, but this is not healthy. We need to really talk this through.
Yeah, and then from a counseling perspective, I would say, you definitely need to be on the same page, but think about it from the kids' perspective, going back to what Carl is saying. You know, how is this going to impact our kids if we don't enter in this conversation? And it can't just, in asking each other, so why do you think it's not helpful for us to talk to our kids about this? And then get into that conversation, because if it's like, it's just uncomfortable, or I'm scared, or I grew up in, very conservative, and so on, I used to this, then that's good. Okay, all right, I see where you're coming from, I see that perspective. However, we know that if we keep holding back, and pretending that this truck is not coming because it'll, run over us, it's not going to stop the truck from coming running over us. It will. So, but that conversation is good. I would say you just got to get into the conversation, ask questions. So why? Why are you uncomfortable with having this conversation? And then if we don't have this conversation, how do you think this is going to help or not help our kids?
Yeah. And if Carl's parents had perhaps had some conversations with him growing up, there's a cycle in his family with sexual trauma, I guess, would you say? Issues. So like if those things had been addressed, it could have saved our marriage so much heartache. So, with Hunter especially, and Mia, because women can have porn addictions too, like I just wanted the cycle to end. Like the addiction, the family addiction was going to end in this generation. We were going to do everything we can. We can't stop everything, but we can do all the things that we can do to prevent those things to continue in our family. And so for us, like Carl's very well researched on all of these things, so I kind of lean into him when it comes to, the sex talks and all of that, because he does a lot of research. And he's seen a lot of what happens to the men who haven't had the appropriate conversations and the heartache and just the trauma that they have. So, I just want my kids to, I wanted it to end. I wanted the addiction to end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't guarantee a whole lot of things because there's really almost no guarantees in life. There's very few. But I will guarantee this. If you don't talk to your kids about sex, it's not going to end good. That's a guarantee. It will never end good. And it might not, when I say that, it doesn't mean your kid's going to become a hopeless porn addict. It might not end good, might mean that they carry a misunderstanding or a shameful approach to sex into their marriage, and maybe it affects their kids, and now it's your grandkids. But either way, it's not going to end good. I promise you that. It will not end good.
This one's the big one, bro. I don't know. I don't even know if you guys can handle this. Yeah, it's heavy. How do you explain to your children that it is not okay to date Oilers fans?
Oiler fans?
Yeah. So
I feel like that's very much like us with like a Cowboys fan, right? Like
that's why I guess that's why this
so
is
you
so
just don't do
appropriate.
it, right? You just don't.
Yeah.
It's unhealthy.
It's unhealthy.
It's ungodly.
It's bad parenting.
It is bad
Yeah.
parenting. Yeah.
I mean, generally in life, we try to teach our kids to value other people, and everybody's deserving of love and human dignity and all that stuff. But when if it's a Cowboys fan, they're a cockroach or a trash bag. Don't deal with them.
That's strong.
It's just how it is. Okay. And hey, going back to goals, Hunter, do you want to marry a trash bag or do you want to marry someone that is...
Oh, wow.
No, I don't. Okay, so, that's how it works. So, I would imagine Calgary, Edmonton, probably similar thing, right?
Yeah,
You just
very similar.
explain it in goals.
Go Panthers, right?
Yeah. Do you want your
Go
life
Panthers.
to... What do you want for your life? You want that? Come on.
Well, thank you, Carl and Kater, for joining us this weekend. We look forward to more of you over the coming days. This has been really enlightening. I really appreciate your openness to open up your life to us. They didn't get a lot into their story tonight because otherwise you won't want to come to church this weekend because there'll be more about their story this weekend. And even the men's thing tomorrow, everything's going to be different. Tomorrow's going to be different. It's not going to be like tonight. It's going to be very different tomorrow. So if you're a guy, I encourage you to come out. Even if you sign up late, you can just pay $15 and come and can't eat because the food is bought. But I encourage you to come out tomorrow morning at 9. It's just going to be Carl and I. And I just love the fact that Carl and Katie come as a package because we've never had us talk about this issue from a mother or a wife or a teacher perspective. Anytime Southview is engaged in this conversation, it's always been from a male perspective. And so I just like that both of them up here and both of them are going to be at all the weekend services. And the weekend services is going to be mostly focused on shame, unpacking that a lot, faith, and mental health. But obviously, sex and pornography are going to be in that because that's a part of life and part of your story. But it's going to be different. It's not going to be like what happened tonight, or what we talked about tonight. Tonight was very much parenting focus. I'm sorry I didn't get to all your questions. Carl and Katie are going to be over by the books. So if you want to check out one of Carl's books, it's awesome. I've read it. I've taken some individuals through it. It's really helpful, very practical. Definitely a lot of Jersey directness in there. So be prepared for that. But it was really helpful and really good. We just really thank you so much for being willing to help us become comfortable with an uncomfortable topic, but a much needed topic that the church needs to grow and get better at. It's been awesome. Finish up eating the dessert. Grab that. Check out some of the resources too that were shown on the screen will be in the resource center this weekend, and you can borrow the books. There's about 1 or 2 of each of those books in the resource center, not open tonight, but this weekend, and the rest of the weekend or after that, you can check out. And then you can always go online, look up the names of some of these books, and buy them. For those of you that would like to rewatch this, we did record it. I didn't tell you guys that before because I didn't want none of you not show up. So thank you all so much. This was amazing, but I want to do a benediction before we go. But before we do the benediction, I would love us all, because this is a heavy topic, and we're going to be doing this a lot this weekend. And so we're doing it again tomorrow morning, just Carl and I. But it's not going to be an interview. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be different. Would love for you to pray for us, to give us energy, protection, because we are going into an area that the enemy probably doesn't like us talking about. Because I think the church... my desire to have in this is I want Southview to become a safe place for us to talk to our kids, for us to talk about other men, talk to other men, husband and wives, talk to husband and wives about this issue, about sex, about marriage, about pornography, about struggles, about marital issues, and open the floodgates to like, hey, It's okay for us to go and get help. It's okay for us to go and talk to somebody about our kids or about struggles that we're having, instead of what people are going to think about us if my kid struggles with this, or if our marriage is struggling with this. We need to do away with that. And I really respect some of you for being willing to entrust this stage to us and to this, because it is a very pervasive issue. And I don't think the church has done a great job, to be honest, navigating this. And it's time. And Carl and Katie will be addressing that question, actually, a little bit more on the weekend itself. But thank you all. But if you don't mind reaching your hand forward and praying for us, I don't know who wants to pray. Anybody want to pray? I'm really putting people on the spot here, but I don't want to pray for us. I don't want to pray for me. I would like someone to pray for us. Justine, you're over there. You want to pray for us? I'll give you the mic. I'm losing my voice too, so that doesn't help. Thanks, Justine.
No worries. God, we just thank you so much for this opportunity tonight to raise these questions that so often sit in the darkness and cover us with so much shame. So we thank you for bringing this into the light. Thank you for the reminder that our worth is not in what we do or the mistakes we make, but our worth is found solely in you, and your perfect righteousness lived on our behalf, Lord. And so may we remember that as we address these topics and conversations. We pray that your wisdom would continue to cover Carl and Katie and Fernando as well as he leads into this weekend. We, again, thank you that they are here with us, willing to share their stories, willing to be open and vulnerable. And we pray that we can take this same vulnerability back into our homes, into our small groups, into our relationships, and that this can be a topic that can be one of hope and restoration, Lord, instead of the guilt and shame that it has carried for so long. And so we ask you go before us into this weekend, prepare the hearts of those who will hear this message, even now, be working within them to make them open and receptive to the words that they will hear this weekend. We pray this all, Lord, in your name.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, guys. Give Katie and Carl a good selfie. Thank you. I just want to pray this benediction over us as we leave and go home and whatnot. I really like this because there's a verse in here that I like when it talks about grounding us in His love. And I feel with this topic, we need to approach it with love. We need to approach it with empathy. And I just love this benediction. But for this reason, and I'm going to use the word we for where it says I. For this reason, we bow our knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of the glory, that He may grant us to be strengthened with power through His Spirit in our inner being, so that Christ may dwell in our hearts through faith, that us being rooted and grounded in love, and having strength to comprehend with all the saints, what is the breadth, the height, the depth, the height and the depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to all the fullness of God. Now to Him who is able to do far more abundantly all that we ask and think, according to the power at work within us. To Him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen.